Welcome to the Reconciling Mission podcast, where we explore missional engagement with our local communities and a broader understanding of reconciliation. I'm Mina, your host, Network and Development Lead. I'm a priest, an author, and someone who has the privilege of leading two wonderful churches in Derby. So join me as we dive into rich conversations, biblical insights, and inspiring stories of churches and individuals finding ways to engage with our neighbours and contribute to reconciliation in our local contexts. Today, we have got with us Alistair, who is the leader of Reconciling Initiatives, and he is the one who has invented the Reconciling Mission programme. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the theoretical framework that underpins the Reconciling Mission programme?
So we start with meeting basic human needs, and churches are often really good at this. They're, putting on a food bank, might be hosting a food pantry, might be laying on services to work with those who are homeless and provide shelter, might be providing company for people who are lonely. And connections for people who are isolated. So churches are really good at doing work to meet basic human needs. The difficulty is if we stop there, we can end up just reinforcing the status quo, the systems that are creating those problems in the first place. And so what this model does is to nudge us to thinking, okay, so where do we go from here beyond just meeting basic human needs? How do we begin to address something of the more systemic issues that are being faced? And challenging the system can be, something as simple as just doing things differently than the way things are normally done. So, for example, in the mental health field, one of the people on the Reconciling Mission program in the first cohort worked with a group of local people in the community to provide a listening service for people with mental health challenges in collaboration with a local GP practice, because the GP practice was kind of completely overwhelmed with people with mental health challenges and couldn't deal with all of this, and often people needed to be reached before they were at a point of desperation. And so rather than relying on professional services, a challenge to the system was actually we as local people will do something for our neighbours and put this on and have this, it can be complementary to the professional stuff, but it's a challenge to the way things are done.
Another really special part of the programme is that you this strengths-based community building aspect of it, also kind of known as this asset-based community development. So how can you tell us a bit about that?
Particularly when it comes to addressing questions of poverty, for example, in a local community, historically, what's been seen is that outside organizations, outside actors, even the church, should be the ones to address this and to try and solve the questions of poverty. But it's very much a deficit model of, people are lacking stuff. How can we make up for those lack? And strengths-based approaches and asset-based community development is the key one that we work with, is really going, let's not start there, because actually people have gifts, skills, strengths, passions in the midst of enormous challenges and poverty, for example. And that's where we need to start, is with the things that people have rather than the things that they don't have. And so rather than seeing neighbours as sort of needy, seeing, okay, so where are the gifts, where are the passions, what do people care about, what are people motivated to want to do something about, how do we work with that? Who's already getting themselves organised to address the challenges in our neighbourhood and community? How can we, applaud them, commend them, support them, rather than seeing that it's all got to be about us in the church?
It's the idea of finding the treasure that's already there, which is kind of quite eye-opening. But you're right, it comes back to the theoretical framework, I think, that the church over the years has been used to being in the position of power. And what we're saying through this program and what we're exploring is actually partnership because there's treasure already there. We don't need to provide the treasure as the church.
That's right. But it's also going, actually, the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of God is at work amongst our neighbors and in our communities in ways that we just sometimes haven't noticed and haven't woken up to. And it's going, actually, maybe we need to look again and go, oh, actually, that is something of God. And if that's something of God, why aren't we commending it and why aren't we celebrating it? Why aren't we supporting it? Rather than thinking we're the ones who've got the Spirit of God and we've got to bless
Yep.
you with the Spirit's gifts, actually that you might have those and you might have things to teach us and we might have things to learn from you. And that is a big shift.
But you've seen that working out through the cohorts and their responses to that. So, what has been your biggest encouragement?
One of the things we really encourage people to do is some mapping of the local neighbourhood and community, really understanding who and what is there in a neighbourhood, but how people work with that and what use they put that to, in a sense, is for them to discern. I'm thinking of one of the Lincoln group who's in a really challenging housing estate. And they'd had a lot of problems with sort of vandalism and youth, kind of idle youth, kind of picking on the church as a sort of an object to kind of, break windows or whatever. And um, the vicar of that parish, she through the program suddenly thought, okay, there's a different way of approaching this, which is here's these young people with all this energy and so on. How do we work with that? And through a conversation with somebody in the local council who said, oh, we've got a program for trying to provide things for youth. When, okay, maybe we could actually create a gym in our church building where these young people can come and use all their energy to good purpose, to develop some pride and self-confidence. And rather than complaining about these young people in our neighborhood, actually welcome them in, provide a space where they can develop themselves with some support from others, and what does that do? It completely changes the relationship between those young people and the church. It's like, this is our church, they're not going to throw stones at this church because now they've got a sense of ownership of it. And it's not that they're coming to church services on Sunday, but they are kind of engaging with people in the church community. And there's a relationship that is being built that is just completely different to where things were at before. So, Sam, who's the vicar in that context, was just so excited by what she was learning and by the shift that helped create for her congregation in how they engaged with young people in their community.
Oh, that's brilliant. I really, really love those stories. Okay, so what are you planning for the future, Alistair?
My sense is that, there's a huge amount of anxiety, certainly within the Church of England at the moment, and there's a great fear of, we're going to die because, people are dying and when they're not being replaced and we're not reaching young people and so on, and so all this huge amount of resources going into trying to reach children and young people. But I think there's something actually very much more fundamental that needs to shift, which is about how we engage with our local neighborhood and community, that's not driven out of a place of anxiety and fear of we're going to die, but is rather around, actually, God is at work in our neighborhood and community. And if we are brave and have eyes to see and understand some different ways of working with people, then actually there is something really life-giving that can happen. And we can just trust God that the future of the church is in God's hands and we don't have to be anxious about it. And even if the church does decline, that is not the end of the world. God's not declining. God's kingdom's not declining. The work of God's Spirit is not declining. God is still always at work, and we can be part of that. And when you get that, it's like, whoa, suddenly this is exciting. This is not something to be worried about.
So I've got one last question for you, Alistair. What is your key piece of advice to local churches engaging in community, engaging with the community today? So what is your biggest bit of advice?
So one is about listening, listening to one's neighbours, listening inside the church, and listening to God. Because unless we're really working at going, okay, God, so what are you showing me here as I look at what's going on? What do I need to notice? And unless there's a sort of prayerful engagement, then we're just likely go in with hobnail boots and sort of make some really crass mistakes. And likewise, around the listening to our neighbours, listening to people outside the church who may have God's voice for us, um, but also listening inside. Okay, so where is there some wisdom that we haven't maybe noticed before? Maybe who are the people on the margins of the church who kind of aren't the power brokers or in the kind of offices and whatever, but actually have a heart for their community. How can we listen to them and learn from them? So listening would be a sort of really key first piece. I think building relationships is really at the heart of our approach. And so, who are the people who we see as people of peace, who we notice are committed to things that we're committed to, even if the language they'd use is not Christian language? And how can we build our relationships with them and be committed to that relationship over the long term? That this is not a utilitarian thing of, using this person for this. It's about how do we really get to know and love our neighbours and be committed to that relationship over the long haul. So starting with listening and being committed to relationship building, those are foundational pieces. There's more beyond that, but I think if those two are really at the heart of how you're approaching things, and you're being prepared to be brave and to step outside your comfort zones and talk to people who make you uncomfortable, but who may have God's word for you, then I think there is hope for the church.
Oh, thank you so much, Alistair. It's been really, really lovely to talk to you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us for this episode. And we will see you again soon.